So now that you had a chance to study the letters of the alphabet and also their sounds, and we're going to practice writing them a little bit later. Just a couple of quick facts that you should remember and memorize and know. There are 7 vowels in Greek. 2 of them are always short, and so that's the epsilon down here and the omicron. They are always short. 2 of them are always long. That's eta and omega. Those are always long. And then 2 could be either short or long, depending on how it's used. That's alpha, iota, and upsilon. But whether they're short or long, they're pronounced the same way. So alpha is still always pronounced ah, upsilon is always still pronounced oo, and the only one that's really different is iota. Iota is the only one that if it's short, it'll sound something like hit, an is sound. And if it's long, it'll sound like machine. So have a long E sound. So a short sound for iota is I, long sound is E. But for alpha and upsilon, it doesn't matter whether it's short or long. It's going to be pronounced in the same way. Okay, next slide. We have diphthongs in English and we have diphthongs in Greek. And what I mean by diphthong is when two vowels are put together, the combination of the vowel produces a new sound. And so we have equivalents of these in English, and there are 8 vowel combinations in Greek, or 8 diphthongs. And so alpha, iota is pronounced I as in aisle. And all of this, by the way, you can rehearse also in your textbook Mounts. Mounts goes over all this. But alpha iota is aisle. Epsilon iota is A as in 8. Omicron iota is oi as in oil. Alpha upsilon is A as in automobile, or automatic, or laudable. Omicron upsilon is oo as in soup. It's a little bit longer. So if upsilon is oo, then omicron upsilon is oo. And a very famous example is Jesus, which is the word for Jesus in Greek. Jesus. You have that E, A, then sus, and you have to pronounce it really fast as Jesus. This is a fun one. Upsilon iota is pronounced we together, like in sweet. You can see that in the word sweet. Both epsilon upsilon and eta upsilon are pronounced u as in feud. Next slide. There's some punctuation that you'll need to know, or what we call diacritical marks. Almost always, when you see the vowel combinations together, like for example, let's go over. We just learned alpha iota. When you see that used in combination, you don't pronounce the letters separately. You pronounce this as I as in aisle. Except when you have 2 dots over a letter, like in this word right here. Do you see that? There are 2 dots over that letter. So if the 2 dots weren't there, if all we had was this, there's no dots, then I would pronounce this as a sias. I would pronounce the alpha iota together as I. But with the 2 dots, what that does is it tells the reader, hey, don't pronounce this as a normal diphthong. Pronounce these letters as if they're separate individual. So in this case, I would pronounce this not as a sias, but instead as a saias. Do you see how I'm pronouncing each letter separately? Saias. And the reason why we have diaresis, this is the name of the punctuation mark, diaresis, is because especially with foreign language words that are translated or transliterated into Greek, sometimes the Greek has a hard time pronouncing the foreign language words. So in this case, Isaiah is a Hebrew name. And how do they approximate Isaiah in Greek? Well, what they came up with is Esaias. So they think that that's the way to say Isaiah in the closest possible way. This other word here is Moses. And so that's the word for Moses. There's also the next section right here, something we call three improper diphthongs. These are diphthongs, but they're called improper diphthongs because the second vowel doesn't stand next or adjacent to the first vowel. Instead, it's subscript. So you see that little line that's under the alpha and the eta and the omega? That's called an iota subscript. Script. I'm not writing that correctly. Iota sub. There we go. That's better. Subscript. Sorry about that. Bad spelling. Okay. This is called an iota subscript, and it doesn't really affect the pronunciation at all. So this is still pronounced a, o. So notice that the iota doesn't affect the pronunciation. That's why it's called an improper diphthong. But the iota subscript is actually very important. It's an important grammatical marker that you'll learn later when we talk about the dative case in Greek. And so a word is spelled incorrectly if you forget to put the iota subscript when you spell it out. And of course, on quizzes and things like that, if you don't put the iota subscript when it should be there as part of the spelling, it will be marked wrong. So it's more of a convention for spelling than it and a grammatical tag than other things. All right. Besides the diacritical marks, the diareses, and also the iotas, and then also the improper diphthongs, there's something called rough and smooth breathing marks, and that's all that's to say is that you have a smooth breathing mark, looks like a apostrophe, like apostrophe S, or a rough breathing mark, which is kind of a closed apostrophe, the opposite direction. These are usually used when a word begins with a vowel. So for this one right here, Adelphi, which is the word for sisters plural, notice that right over the alpha, right here, you see that there is a smooth breathing mark. So smooth breathing marks are silent and add nothing to the pronunciation of the word. So this is pronounced Adelphi. Now, can you pronounce this? This is ate. Notice here that if you have two vowels, you have a diphthong, the smoothing breathing mark doesn't go over the first letter, but the second. Now, when it comes to the rough breathing mark is pronounced. So if you see this over letter, this is pronounced ha. There's an H sound that's added with the smooth breathing mark. So if I were to pronounce this right here, this would be hooper. If I were to write it out in English, I would write it out this way. Hooper. I would actually spell out that rough breathing mark as a letter H. Rough breathing marks also appear before initial row, and in this case, no added sound, no sound is added to the word. So here you have the word rhema. Let me mark it here. This is rhema, and this is where we get the word rhetoric. So you can see this in English a little bit, where the H is silent. You don't really say it when we say rhetoric, but rhema is a Greek word for word, saying or expression. If a rough breathing mark falls on a capital letter, you don't put the rough breathing mark over the letter, but in front of it. Like here's the name Abraham or Abraham. If the rough breathing mark falls on the diphthong, we said this before. If a breathing mark falls on a diphthong, the breathing mark is usually on the second letter, like an ate. It wouldn't be over the alpha, but over the second letter of the diphthong. And this is hutos. Hutos. In Greek, we also have consonant clusters. That's when you have consonants, one, two, sometimes three consonants put together, and they all produce one sound. So they're not a separate syllable. They produce one sound. We can't go over all possible clusters in Greek. There are too many. I think the safe rule to say is if you have a consonant cluster in English, likely it's a consonant cluster in Greek. So I think that's just the easiest rule to use. So if you see a consonant cluster, if it exists in English, if there's an English equivalent, then it's likely a consonant cluster in Greek too. So let's look at some easy examples. The word here, staros, which is a word for cross, the sigma tau, that's a consonant cluster. It sounds very much like S and T as in English, stop or start. So this is an English consonant cluster, S and T. That's very similar to the sigma tau consonant cluster. And so that's what I mean. If it exists in English, likely there is a Greek equivalent for the consonant clusters. So, for example, Christmas. This is a consonant cluster, CHR. Here we have the word Christos. If I translate, this is actually where we get the word Christmas. And so oftentimes the English consonant clusters originate from the Greek, earlier Greek words that were used. So Christos, the word for Messiah or Christ, is the basis for the word for Christmas. And that CHR is one sound. We pronounce it together. We don't break it up into smaller syllables. So we have another word, glossa. That's a word for tongue or language. And it has that gamma lambda. It sounds very similar to a GL sound. So again, and then we have pleroma, which is the word for fullness, and that P lambda consonant cluster sounds very much like the letter P and L in English. So if it exists in English as a consonant cluster, likely it exists in Greek. Now, are there any clusters that are unique to only Greek and not English? And the answer is yes. There's a set of clusters, consonant clusters, that you will never see in English, but they occur frequently in Greek. And this set of consonant clusters is what we call the gamma nasal. When you have a velar sound, let me write this out here. So if you have a velar sound, that's a sound that sounds like a K as in K or a G as in G. So if you look at gamma, kappa, chi, kasi, those are all what we call velar sounds. That means they're sounds that come from your throat. The g, the k, the ch, and the ks sound. They come from your throat. If these letters are preceded by a gamma, the first the gamma all becomes an N sound, and then you pronounce the second letter with it. So it'll become clear as we look at some examples. So here's a consonant cluster. This is a gamma nasal. Notice that the first letter is gamma and the second letter is gamma too. All right. So in a consonant gamma nasal, the first letter is always gamma, and the second letter can be a gamma, a kappa, a chi, or kasi. But if you have a true gamma nasal, then the first letter is pronounced with an N sound. So this right here, it's not agalos. You know, it looks like there's two gammas here. So when I pronounce this agalos, and the answer is no, you would pronounce this angelos, because the first gamma here is pronounced with an N-sounding letter. So that's the word we get the word angel or messenger, angelos, angelos. But it's spelled alpha, gamma, gamma, epsilon, lambda, omicron, sigma. And then for this one, it looks like the letter is sugkaleo. Wouldn't you pronounce this as sugkaleo? But you don't. You would pronounce this as soon kaleo. Soon kaleo. If I were to write it out in English, it's pronounced soon kaleo. So you have this nunk consonant cluster. You have this nung consonant cluster. The first gamma is always pronounced with an N sound, and then you pronounce the second letter as it's normally pronounced in the alphabet. So look at this one. This is a nunk sound. So this is one of my favorite words because it's such a tongue twister. If you want a good word that's hard to pronounce in Greek, this is splonknizomai. Splonknizomai. So this right here, that's an NCH sound. All right, nunk. So you wouldn't say sploghnizomai. You would say splonknizomai. And then this one, this gamma kasi, is pronounced nunks. Again, you have the N sound in the front. And this is pharynx, and where we get the word ravine or valley. You know, the Roman phalanx, for example, is a V-shaped or ravine-shaped military formation used to plow through armies. And so that comes from the Greek word, pharynx.